Good morning, everyone. My name is Brett Stevens. I am the discipleship pastor here, and I am continuing our series, Gearing Up, talking about spiritual preparation, what that looks like in the life of the modern Christian. And one of the things that we often talk about, if you've been in the church or maybe you've encountered church people, you've probably heard this term, sharing the gospel. And unfortunately, a lot of times that video is exactly what we mean when we say that, which is really interesting for a reason I'm going to get into here in just a moment. But today, the thing that we're talking about, the preparation that we're talking about, is this verse. Fitting our feet. For shoes, put on the peace that comes from the good news, so that you will be fully prepared. And that word good news, in some translations you might read the word gospel. And that's what's so ironic about this use of the word. That the word gospel means good news. That's the origin of that word. And yet sometimes the way that we share it makes it sound anything but good. And this verse is so interesting because there are three parts to this verse. Three parts to this. So for shoes, we're putting on the peace of the good news so that we'll be fully prepared. So there's the three parts. There's preparation, there's peace, and there's good news. And to really understand what Paul is getting at as he was writing to the Ephesians, we got to look at all three of these parts. So I want to start first with this good news, this word gospel. You see, our word gospel comes from an old English word, Godspell, which just means good news. It's the same meaning. But in Greek, and the language that Paul wrote this in, the word was euangelion. And you don't have to remember that, but some of you guys find this stuff interesting. So euangelion. And you might notice that this word sounds a little bit like our modern word evangelism. So the word evangelism is also drawn from this same word, euangelion. And the history of the word euangelion, like the image, so this is like the picture. This is the picture of what this word represents. The army is out far afield, and they're having this big battle. And everyone's at home, and they're wondering, they're waiting. They've all got loved ones who are out there in the field, and they don't know what's happened. And so they're waiting. Are the enemies going to come to our walls? Are they going to destroy everything we love? Is my family safe? No one knows. No one knows. And out there in the field, the army wins. And they appoint somebody who's fast. And they say, go and tell them the good news. And so that person who's going to run, right, they tie their shoes up tight. And if they're wearing like the toga or the robe or whatever, they'll wrap it up in a belt and they'll run as fast as they can. And every village and every town that they go through until they get back to the city, they tell everyone, we won. We won. The enemy's defeated. We're victorious. You're safe. We won. That's the image captured by the word euangelion. The good news. The good news. Now, when Paul wrote this, so Paul's an interesting person, right? He is a Jew. He is raised as a Hebrew person from his birth, very devout, very serious, deeply studied in the scriptures, but he's also a Roman citizen. And so he would use this word knowing that it means this. To the Roman world, it means this victory, this message of triumph, this message of security and safety. But also, as a Hebrew person, he would know this verse, this next one. This is from Isaiah. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of the messenger who brings good news. The good news of peace and salvation. The news that the God of Israel reigns. And so when he's talking about fitting his feet with the readiness of the gospel of peace, he can't hear the word good news. He can't hear the word gospel without thinking of this. And this message was originally written, so Isaiah would have originally written this to a group of people far from their home, living in exile, wondering if they're ever going to see their homeland again. And he's writing to tell them, guys, there will come an end to our struggle. There will come an end to our suffering, to our time of exile, to our time being far from home. There will come an end to all of that. And how beautiful it will be when we see that person coming over the mountains, bringing good news. It's time to go home. Good news. Our God is still in control. Good news. Our troubles are over. And so for Paul, this is the good news. On the one hand, victory. And he'll say in another place, in the letter to the Colossians, he writes to them that Jesus on the cross triumphed over the dark powers of this world. Good news of victory. And the writer to the Hebrews, we don't know who this is, but the writer to the Hebrews would write and tell people, Jesus, by his death on the cross, defeated death and set free those who all their lives had lived in fear of death. Good news. Good news of triumph over death, of triumph over the dark powers of this world. We've won. Good news. But also, good news, our God is in control. Though we're wanderers here on earth, though we feel out of place and not at home. You may remember Tony talked about this idea that Paul is setting forth into the letter to the Ephesians, that we are a new people kind of here in the middle of this hostile, strange world. We're a new people. And he's saying, guys, we're foreigners, we're wanderers. We don't belong here, but good news, our God is in control. Good news, someday we'll go home. Good news. But there's more to this. It's not just good news, it's the good news of peace. What peace could we have in this world that we feel like strangers and wanderers, this world of conflict and suffering and pain? What does that peace look like? Well, he set out in this letter to the Ephesians, he set out this idea in previous chapters, but he sets out this idea that peace means this. That once we were all different people from different places, different communities, different homes, different lives, all of us fighting and striving against each other, hostile, alienated, enemies, each looking out for our own best, screw you and I'll get mine. But he says, now we're one people, a new people. One people. We're all together. Doesn't matter where you came from. Doesn't matter what you're like, your history, your background, your pains, your hurts. Today, we're one people. But not only that, we're one people with one Spirit, one God, one Lord. Why? Because of what Jesus has done to make peace between humanity and God. In another letter, Paul says it like this. This is from 2 Corinthians. This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone. A new life has begun. And all of this is a gift from God who brought us back to himself through Christ. Peace brought us back to himself. And God has given us this task of reconciling people to him. Reconciliation, peace, an end to the hostilities. And so peace means three things. Peace within ourselves. We are a new person. no longer at conflict with ourselves, no longer fighting against our sin nature to not do the things we don't want to do. Peace within ourselves. Peace in our communities. We are all one group. This new humanity, these new people come together, setting aside past differences, past conflicts, the things that would once divide us, no longer. Peace. And peace with God. Once we were enemies, but now God has drawn us back to himself. Good news. There can be peace in our time. And so if we understand the gospel, the good news of Christ's triumph over death, over the dark powers of this world, over any evil thing that we'll ever encounter, and we understand peace within ourselves, within our communities, within our world, and with God himself. Paul says, if you know that, you follow Jesus, you say, I understand the gospel. I know the good news. I've taken it in myself. And because of that good news, I have peace inside and out. All of that, he says, what does that mean? It's time to be ready. So we can come back to this verse, and now we can say, what is the readiness of the gospel of peace? The readiness. You know, I've got 4 young kids at home. And those of you who have kids or have been around kids, you know, when you got to go somewhere and you've got 4 kids, it takes a little extra time to get ready. But one of the biggest challenge is shoes. Because I can tell, get ready, I'm getting people ready, you go do this, you go do that, you go get ready, go get your shoes on, we got to get ready, and I'm organizing everything, I pack up all my bags, we're ready to go out the door. And I look, one's over here on the couch playing on his phone, one's over here in the kitchen grabbing a snack, 2 of them are upstairs in their room playing. If they've got their shoes on, I can say, drop that, out the door. We're ready to go. But if they don't have their shoes on, drop that, go get your shoes on. All right, now I got to go get the others. All right, you take your snack, that's fine. Take it in the car, go get your shoes on. Go upstairs. Okay, guys, let's go. We got to go downstairs. I come down. He's still on the phone, doesn't have his shoes on. He's still eating the snack, doesn't have his shoes on. Now I got to corral him some more. I got to help the girls get their shoes on. We're not ready to go. Readiness. When it comes time, can you go? That's what Paul's saying. In 2 Corinthians, he laid out this idea. Peace, the good news of peace, isn't just for you. It's for the world. It changes every relationship you will ever have. And if they could know that peace, it would change every relationship they would ever have. So we've been given the ministry of reconciliation. Like that messenger in Isaiah, put on your shoes and run to tell them the good news. That Jesus has defeated death. Tell them the good news that they can have peace inside and out. Tell them the good news. Are you ready to go, though? Are you ready to tell them the good news? Because here's the truth, guys. And this is what Paul says in his letter to the Romans. I think I have this up here. How can they call on him to save them, unless they believe in him? And how can they believe if they've never heard? And how can they hear unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go to tell them without being sent? This is why the scriptures say, how beautiful are the feet of messengers who bring good news. And maybe you've heard that before from Isaiah 52. Are you ready? How will they hear if you don't go and tell them. The world needs to know the message of the gospel of peace. The world needs to know the good news. But how will they know unless you go? And so when Paul says we have to fit our feet with the readiness, he says, God might call on you. Not to go to some faraway country. He may. But most of you, that won't be the case. But he might call on you as you're going through the supermarket. He might call on you in the middle of the afternoon when your neighbor knocks on your door. He might call on you in the break room at work. Are your shoes on? Are you ready? Because he might call on you. And that's what Paul meant when he said, the gospel of peace has to make you ready. You've got to take it inside, and you've got to be so completely changed that you are ready at any moment to share the good news of what Jesus has done in your life, to share the good news of a God who has made peace with the world. So I ask you, friends, are you ready? Are your shoes on? Let me pray for you. Most holy God, you have done something amazing. When we were your enemies, you chose to send your Son to die for us. When we were hostile, opposed to everything you stood for, you came to make peace. When we lived all our lives trapped by sin and death, held captive by the dark powers of this world, you defeated them all on our behalf. So, Holy Lord, will you make us ready? Will you plant this good news in our hearts so that we can share your love with a world that desperately needs it? Holy Spirit, make us ready. Amen.